On the website, you talked about the biggest deficit in the current system, since with your neural networks and machine learning, we're talking about it has to be interconnected, right? Interconnectivity matters. So on that level, you talk about the current systems are piecewise smart, but whole system stupid. Can you elaborate more on that?
When you go into reductionist inquiry, you say to yourself, oh, well, the way we learn about the thing is by studying the parts. And so you create universities so that people study the parts. I'm going to major in mechanical engineering or chemical engineering or electrical engineering or petroleum engineering or right. And it's like, okay, so you go in and you study the whole system, but through a particular very narrow lens. And it allows for, yes, reductionist inquiry and in inquiry in a way that will teach you a lot about the PC parts, but at the expense of thinking about the whole system dynamic. But then the problem is, A, you study like that, and so you are trained in your professional education to take that view of the world. And then, to make matters worse, we throw you out into the work environment and you stay like that. Oh, you are a civil engineer, therefore you think only in this silo, right? So when I'm working on, let's say, a large-scale project with civil engineers, where we're trying to repair a landscape, we're talking maybe many, many square miles. Their training in school is not to think about the wild hydrology, to think about the ecology, to think about how what they're doing impacts all these other fields. They're told your objective when there's a big rain event is to make certain that it doesn't flood, right? And since they're only thinking about that, it's like, well, obviously the solution to that problem is to pipe all the water away as fast as possible, right? Let's just get it out of here. Let's de-water. And that was for a long time the default that you see. And you can go into a lot of cities and you can see this is exactly what was built into many cities in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even into the 1990s. Big, huge stormwater pipes and open, concrete culverts and everything else. It's like, just get the water out of here as quickly as possible. Well, that has profound implications in a lot of other fields. It was an expedient and solution to just not having things flood during a storm event, but it was a solution whereby the civil engineers only talked to other civil engineers, and they did not understand all of the implications that this would create. They did not understand that your infrastructure you're putting in is actually part of a very complex, large system, and it will change the dynamics of that system, and it will interact in all these other ways you don't expect. In other words, because it's part of a living system, putting it in there will affect the dynamics of the living system, and as a result, you will get emergent behaviors from your stormwater management system that you never thought about. And as a matter of fact, because you designed it without thinking about those interactions, it's what you would get when an intelligent person, some people are brilliant. I've worked with some brilliant civil engineers, for example, right? It's what you would get when they are thinking in what we call a silo. It's like, I am thinking only about this, right? And if that were the only dimension that you were trying to solve, it would be so it's piecewise smart. It's a smart solution if that were actually the only thing that you were trying to work with. But it's whole system stupid, not because the person isn't brilliant who designed it, because they are. Some of them are really, really smart. It's because we trained them in a worldview in which we told them, in order to get the job done as quickly as possible with the least amount of work possible, to ignore everything else and ignore those complexities. And therefore, we do that over and over again, right? The electrical engineers are off doing that. The architects are off doing their piece. And this created profoundly degenerative outcomes. right? It's like I go in and I see, boy, we have to completely change the way all the civil engineering is done here, because what it's done is it's dehydrated the landscape. We're dehydrating the landscape. The whole biosphere is collapsing. It's desertifying now, right? As it's desertifying, we're actually now getting less plant cover on the soil. The soil is now becoming erosive because the plant roots aren't there to hold it. When we get a big storm event, now you're getting huge amounts of silt and topsoil running away with it, right? And it's being carried away with it is all of these chemicals that the agricultural folks are doing because they're thinking in their own silo, right? And it's being carried down and pushed into our streams and waters. Now we have, nutrient overloads in our streams and in our rivers, and that's causing ecological, chaos in our streams and waters. And then, of course, all that collects, and where I am in my watershed, it all goes down the Mississippi River and out into the Gulf of Mexico. And now you have this big, huge dead zone right off of the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico. That's an emergent result of all these other things going on that you did, and nobody was thinking about that because they were thinking piecewise, not whole systems. But what's interesting to me is when you start thinking in whole systems, just like if you don't think in whole systems, you can create things that are degenerative. When you do think in whole systems, you start to see how what you are designing can actually have beneficial interrelationships with other parts of the system, whereby what you are designing benefits the other parts of the system, and just as importantly, you benefit from them. Now we can partner with living systems and come much closer to being regenerative. That is, have things that really work. So that's kind of, I guess, maybe the short form of it.